Awesome. So we are recording, and I am here today with Tracy. She is a public speaking coach, amongst so many other things. So, Tracy, tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got there.
Okay, so I know that you said these are generally an hour. So do we have 5 hours? I'm just kidding. So I am a mom, first of all, and that is when somebody asks me, we wear different hats. And so mom to me is like one of the primary hats. I would say the top primary hat is Christian, follower of Christ. And past that, mom. Mom is like second to me. And so actually now I'm grandma, which is kind of fun. So we have two grandbabies and a third due probably in the next 2 months. So that is a huge thing for me. And I'm here in the US. And I come from the nonprofit world, actually. And back in 2022, after years of nonprofit work, I had to walk away. I had to walk away. It was literally killing me. I was sick all the time. There was so much pressure. I was putting in crazy hours, and it was impacting obviously my physical health. It was impacting my mental health. It was impacting my relationship with my kids. It was impacting my relationship with my husband. And so, and it was impacting my walk with God, honestly. And so I just had to walk away. And there is a whole story there if you want to unpack that. But I walked away, and some things kind of transpired over the next couple of months. But as I was thinking about, okay, I'm done with the nonprofit world. I love nonprofits. I support nonprofits. I think nonprofits make the world a much better place. And so I'm always going to support nonprofits and tout them and cheer them on. But for me, I could not be in that space anymore of worker and or heavy volunteer. And so as I was thinking, I'm done with nonprofits, and I just want to go get a job where I can make a lot of money and give freely. And while I was in the nonprofit space, please understand, I was still giving very heavily of my time, even if I was employed, and of our money. And so I just thought, I'm kind of done with the time part. I'll volunteer from here and, here and there, but I just needed to step back for everything that is Tracy. So I wanted to get a job where I made a lot of money so I could just write checks, and of the nonprofits that I just think are beautiful. Most of them that endear my heart are the micro nonprofits, the small nonprofits where the founders are wearing 15 hats and they are boots on the ground. And so that is who my heart is for. And I still have some of those that I love dearly. So that is kind of what happened. Is I started thinking about getting a different job where I could get paid truly. Being an entrepreneur, we talk about what are you worth? What is your time worth? What value do you really place on yourself? And the more I looked, the more I just wanted to vomit. I was like, no, I do not want, I could not pull that trigger and apply for a corporate job. And so I had this kind of tap on my shoulder, a remember when reminder from God. And it was, remember when we talked about this, gosh, like between 20 and 30 years ago, I had a heart, I don't know if I'm going to call it a vision. It wasn't really a vision. It was a longing, more of a, this is what I need to do. And there's a story there as well, but I need to be helping people with their communication. And so God reminded me of, that's really what my heart was all along. And so from that, I started Communicate Great. And Communicate Great, we kind of go into two different veins of work. And then I have a whole other one. But that's kind of how I got to starting Communicate Great. And that was back in April, or no, let's see, August of 2022.
Wow. So there's so many different things there. There were a couple parts where you're like, we can go into this story if, if we definitely want to. And I would love to. So I know, so back before, I know you were talking about you left kind of the nonprofit space
Mm-hmm.
and there were some things that transpired.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that is probably a story that a lot of people can relate to, because I know so many moms that they talk about, they were at a job or they were working something, and when
Mm-hmm.
they were leaving, all this either drama ensued or struggles that they felt personally. So
Right.
I'd love
Yeah.
for you to open that up and talk a little bit about what exactly happened.
Okay. Okay. So actually leaving that job, I'll start with the thought of I'm walking out the door with my stuff. So again, I was putting in stupid, crazy hours, and just it was impacting me all the way around. And everybody can relate to this one. There were toxic people there in the workplace. And at one point, I thought, okay, I'm an empty nester. I'm, getting older, and this is not. I loved the place that I was at. Loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it with everything. So please know that when I left, it felt like a divorce. It was hard for me, but I knew I had to leave. And the idea started with, okay, I'm going to give it a year. That's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to let them know this is my last year. Bring somebody in and I can train them on what I do. And then it went down to, okay, I'm going to leave at the end of the summer. And, if you want to bring somebody in, I can train them. And they found somebody, and I was in the process of that. And then the toxicity kept happening. And then I said, okay, if this happens again, I'm going to give you my 2-week notice. And it happened again. And I said, I need to leave. And by that point, I think they wanted me to go because there was just so much. So it was on May 11th that I left, because I know it. That's my birthday. And I showed up that morning and I did my stuff, and we were having a big celebration that morning. And I saw that through, and the thing happened again. And I just thought, I'm done. I can't. So I went to my office and I packed my stuff up and I walked out the door. And just so you understand, that me leaving was the start of an exodus for other people. And so that kind of tells you what it was. But I walked away. It was May 11th, my birthday. Whew, and as I was walking out and getting in my car, I felt so free. I felt so relieved. It was such a good feeling. And so I drove out of the parking lot feeling like this champion of I'm on top of the world. And so drove off and did not look back. A couple of years later, somebody contacted me and said, these things have changed. Would you consider coming back? No, I would not consider coming back at all. I'm done with that. So, but in the meantime, I'd started to communicate great. So left that. Well, in the meantime, my mom was showing signs of dementia. And it was around Mother's Day, and my dad called and said, hey, I really think you need to come home for Mother's Day, because I'm not sure how many more Mother's Days you're going to have with your mom. So, great, perfect, good time to leave town. So my husband and I drove up, and my mom was declining rapidly. Again, what we thought was dementia. I had seen her at Christmas, and I think between Christmas and Mother's Day, because my dad had a surgery and my mom had a surgery, so I was up for both. But I got a call or a text from my sister in June. It was June 5th. June 5th. And she said, hey, Bryce and Jess, my brother and sister-in-law, took mom to the ER because they walked in. So I called, and here's the story. They walked in and they found my mom kind of slumped over in a chair. And my dad was in the bedroom in the back. So he had no idea. So they kind of yelled, my brother kind of yelled, "Hey, Dad, how long has Mom been like this?" Well, he had no idea. So nobody knows. But they grabbed her and they took her to the ER. It was a smaller town. Then they got her into one of the bigger hospitals there in Oklahoma. So they took her to Norman. And my brother actually worked at the Norman hospitals. So they got her there, and the next day, that was a Sunday, the next day, June 6th, they diagnosed her with glioblastoma, which I knew nothing about, but it is a very aggressive brain tumor. And it was right here in the front of her forehead. It was already lemon sized. And so it was on both sides, the right and the left at that point. And they basically said, we could fight it. We could put her through all the stuff and it will extend her life probably, but not by long. And what is that going to do to her in the meantime at her age? And typically they say you don't live from glioblastoma. And since then, I've heard of some stories where people have survived. And that is a miracle. Let me tell you, if somebody survives that, it's a miracle. And so they gave us typically, usually when you're diagnosed, or when you get it, you've got 6 months to a year. That's typical. And so looking back, what we thought was dementia, we can now see was signs of the brain tumor. So that was June. We had been seeing them at the end of the year before. So we knew she was already well into that 6-month mark. And basically the doctor said, we don't know. We don't know how long she's going to live. And I know it was June 6th because 1 month to the day, July 6th is when she passed. And that rocked my world. So walking away from this job that I love so dearly and was reeling from that, and what am I going to do? Stepping straight into my mom being diagnosed with this very, very aggressive cancer. That was all I could focus on. And what I see now is that is a gift from God, because I was able to spend that last month of her life with her for the most part there 24/7. My husband and I have an RV and we parked it up in one of their driveways, and that's just where we lived, and didn't get much sleep and would go in and check on her. Dad was not really in the place to help care for her. They had been together, but between them being friends, being married, and that day, it was almost 65 years that they had been together. So, and no marriage is perfect, not at all. And they definitely had some struggles. And what is your mind like when you're a person that you've been with, that you've had 3 kids with, that you've raised them, now you've got grandkids together, and now, great grandkids are on the horizon. How do you cope with that? And so he is actually a very logical person. And so he went into administrator role because that's what he did before he retired. So he went into administrator role and started, trying to be the very logical person that he is. And I had to help him let go of some of that and just be in the moment with her, telling him, if you don't spend time with her, you're going to regret it. Sit with her, hold her hand. He didn't want to do it. He wanted to be doing proactive other things. And I think some of it was he wanted to kind of hide from what was happening. But truly, when I say that was a gift, me getting to spend that last month of her life, it was a gift. And part of it was because she and I did not always get along, and it was not on her side, it was on my side. A lot of us daughters and sons too, I'm sure, we can kind of get annoyed with our moms, but I always loved her, but sometimes I would get frustrated with her. And so it was a very very healing time for me. And at that point in the stage, I know she knows I was there. She knew who I was. She knew who everybody was that came around to the day she died. She understood that. So it wasn't like dementia in that regard where she just didn't know who people were. She knew who we were. And she knew our roles. She knew child, grandchild, person from church, friend. She knew all of that. But at a certain point, she could not verbally communicate anymore. She was having seizures. And I figured that one out because I just thought this behavior is weird. And a lot of times people think of seizures as the convulsions, and that's not true. What I learned, that's not true. And so I asked the hospice head nurse, this is what she's doing. I think it's a seizure. And she said, it very well could be. And so they came and she started doing it. And I got her eye contact, I got her attention, and she was with somebody else, an aide, and she motioned to the aide. And so the aide started trying to snap in her eyes and get her attention and say her name. Her name was Doris, and Doris, and all the things. And mom was just not responsive at all. And so basically they said, yeah, that's what she's having is seizures. And looking back, she had been having them all along. We just didn't recognize it as a seizure. So that was really hard. When she would have them, I would just go lightly touch her to let her know she wasn't alone. Sometimes I would put my hand on her head and I could feel through her skull the vibration of it happening. And that was hard. That was super, super hard. So she passed, and then there's all of the dad's not in a place to, help make decisions. And so the three of us would go with dad to the funeral home. And even before she passed, we would go, we looked at caskets, we talked about the plan. It was in the middle of summer in Oklahoma, which I don't know if you've been to Oklahoma in the middle of summer. It's hot. It's very hot. And he knew he wanted it in the morning. He knew he wanted the graveside first because it was so hot. And then he knew he wanted a service at the church right after. So he kind of flipped things, but he did it with logic and with thought. So it made sense. So there was no open casket or casket at the what I'm calling the memorial service after. But getting from that, my sister actually happened to be out of the country when she passed. And so we asked the funeral home if they could basically freeze mom until my sister and her family could get back into town. And so that kind of was longer than normal, that period between passing and the services. And so there was a lot to do in the meantime. And, my sister-in-law was beautiful. She pitched in and created, different things. She wrote the obituary. She's a great writer. And the church stepped in and helped create the slideshow and the music. And so people pitched in. It wasn't all on me, which I'm so grateful for. But that was hard. So I'm going from this divorce from this job to my mom passing and helping my dad now cope. So I continued to stay up there in our RV for a while, just helping dad process and work through things. And now I've got to go to the title or the tag agency and get her name off this. And I've got to go to the banks and get her name off this. And all of that, waiting on the death certificate, because you can't do those things without the death certificate. So it was just a very long process. And finally, around the end of July, August, I started thinking, okay, now I've got to get my life back on track because I've had all of these things happen and I need to make money. What am I going to do? I don't want to go get corporate. I need to start this job that God reminded me about, but that went on pause for a while. So that was kind of the stuff in between that happened, me walking away from the nonprofit world and me starting Communicate Great. So it was a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. How did you switch your brain around from such an emotional, difficult time, which, was a blessing, but it was also very difficult, and kind of gathering yourself up enough to then start a whole business?
So I started it, but that doesn't mean I did it well. So I tell people, like, my business has legally been in place since August 1st of 2022, but that doesn't mean I was running my business. So I would say that first year, and then plus let's add some months. So maybe the first year and a quarter, the first year and a half, I didn't know what I was doing. I was still trying to heal from everything that had gone on and trying to get this business going. And then you have a whole other thing, and this is something I talk to other entrepreneurs about. We have a passion. We have a passion to do something. We have a passion to help people, and that's why we start our business. I know that there are a few people who go, where can I make the money? That's what I'm going to start my business in. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs say, what is my passion? Because that is how they want to serve others. And that's what I did. I started Communicate Great with a passion to serve others because I wanted to see the world a better place. And I knew that the two ways of Communicate Great that I help people both could serve the world through me serving my clients. And you go into something, you have a passion, but me, I don't have a business degree. I don't know the first thing about running a business. I can grab some business books and read them, and that helps. But I started in survival mode. When I was, I have 2 degrees. And so when I was working on my bachelor's, I took swimming. You had to have so many credits of PE, right, of athletics. And so I did lifeguard because I'd been a swimmer all my life, not competitive, but we had boats. And my dad was a lifeguard when he was in high school. And so he made the three of us take swimming lessons from the time we were children. So I thought, okay, that's going to be easy peasy. So I did the lifeguard course so that I could get some more credit. And you have to tread water in the deep end, fully clothed. At least I had to back then. I don't know what it's like today. It's probably completely different. But we had to jump into the deep end, fully clothed, shoes and socks and everything on. And we had to navigate not getting fully undressed, but doing certain things, like we had to take our shoes off and tie the shoelaces together and throw them around our neck, those kinds of things. And so we wore a button-up shirt, and we had to take the shirt off. Obviously, I had a shirt on underneath it, but we had to take our shirt off and button it up, spin it around on our neck, and flip it to where you got air in it. So it created kind of like a flotation device almost. And you did the same thing with your pants. You took them off. Obviously, I had shorts on, and you tied off the bottoms, and then you flipped them over and got air in that as a flotation device. And you kind of used both of those as a way to float. So that was one of our exercises that we had to do, and we had to stay in the water X number of time. Another time, we just had to jump in and just tread water for 20 minutes in the deep end. And that's how I felt that first year, year and a quarter, year and a half. I felt like I was treading water that entire time and trying to just right my direction, or, change what was happening just slightly in the movement of me moving my arms back and forth and pedaling my legs. And so that's how I felt. I felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything about business. I did not have clarity of thought. I was still in that process of, let me try this, let me try that, let me do this, because I was listening to so many people say, this is the way to go, and that's the way to go. And I was trying it all. And really, into that second year, I started thinking, okay, this is way too chaotic. I really need to figure this out and stop listening to everybody and chasing all of the rabbits and doing all of the things, because that had me truly treading water and spinning in circles and all of those things. So I would say, even though on calendar my company is over 3 years old, it's really not. I really didn't know what I was doing. And I can honestly say the end of 2024 and 2025, I really started getting momentum and pulling down and clarifying and knowing what my path was going to be. So it took me a while, Michelle. It took me a while to really get it going.
Yeah, I think that's really relatable. I feel like pretty much everybody, when you enter entrepreneurship, you're just kind of treading water for a while, trying to figure out, who do I listen to? Or you try this and then you don't try it long enough to actually see results, but you jump ship because you assume something else is going to pay off faster,
Right.
right? And you do all of these different things. What do you feel like looking back on all of that, if you could go back in time to like Tracy, who's just starting her business,
Right.
what's the piece of advice that you would give her to kind of not have to be treading water for a year and a half?
So and again, I am not a business coach, please know that. But let's remove everything that happened to me that had my brain so jumbled. And by the way, at that point, I had not been sleeping well since the end of 2020. So I'm also dealing with very sleepy brain, right, through all of that. And if you remove all of that, if I was going into Create and Communicate Great, fresh, jumping in, I would say, number one, put money back before, if you can, and sometimes you can't. Obviously, I walked away from a job, and because I was under contract and because some things had happened, they were paying me through the end of my contract. So I did have some money coming in. But if you're starting your job, I know a lot of people will still be full-time and then they start their company as kind of a side hustle until they can really get it going and transition. And I think that's a great job. So number one, make sure I have enough money to live on for a while. Luckily, my husband works and he makes a good living. That's number one. Number two, really figure out what you're doing. Really come to a sitting still place and write it all out. What is your vision for your company? What is your mission? How are you going to accomplish that? And so if I were doing it again, and this isn't my advice for anybody, if I were doing it again, I would sit very still for at least the first month and ask myself questions and really write it down. I'm still the person that writes it down. I use my computer a lot, but I still like paper and pen and writing it down and crossing it off and starting again. I still like that. So I would just sit and ask myself questions. Who do I want to serve? Why do I want to serve them? And create that so that then I could have direction. So for instance, if I asked myself, how do I want to serve them? At first it was, I heard, oh, you have to have a course. You have to have a mastermind. You have to have a community, all of the things. And it took me a while to land, podcast. You have to have a podcast. I have two, by the way. I have to have a podcast. And I would sit and think, does this serve my client? Can I use this as a tool to serve my client? And that's my advice to me, sitting down, thinking it through, because not everything might serve who you are serving, if that makes sense. So now I have landed on communities because even though I'm a massive introvert, I love people and I want to serve people and I want to serve them with the best I can. And I think the community is a great model, and then I can fill in within the community. And that's why I love school. I have a women in business community on Facebook, and I would move it over, but that's been there for years. And then I had like my public speakers, then a couple of other through my website. And if people just don't go there. And what I figured out with school is if it's a platform where there are already a lot of people and maybe they're already in other communities, it's kind of like Facebook was, like everybody used to be on Facebook. And so it made sense to have my women in business on Facebook because these women are already there. And that's how I met a lot of them. So putting my community into the school platform, I think, has been one of the best decisions that I've made in my business, because this is where I can serve people and I can serve them well.
I love that. So now you feel like you finally have a little bit of a grasp on what you're doing. You've got your school community, you've got your business, and it's thriving, which is great. And so, now you said you're also a mom.
Yes.
How old are your kids?
That I am an empty nester. They are
Yeah.
all gone. So 23
Mhm.
to, gosh, how old is Carter? He's going to be 30. He's 29. He is going to be 30 this year. So we're going to have 24 to 30 in
Mhm.
2026.
That's
So
awesome.
and they're all married. So we
Mhm.
have 10 kids. That's what I tell people. I've got 10 kids. They're all adults. And we have two grandbabies. The first one turned a year 2 days ago.
Mhm.
So a year to roughly between 5 and 6 months, and then the next one coming soon. So all adults.
That's so sweet. Is anybody else in the family entrepreneurial, or was this just like totally out of left field?
It, I would say
Mhm.
yes. So our youngest two, and sort of our oldest, and I'll explain that in a second, but the youngest boy, he's not the youngest child, but he's the youngest boy. He did start his own company and tried to get that going. And then he was a partner with one of his friends in a different company. And when he decided he was going to get married, he knew he needed a big boy job. Not that being the entrepreneur is not, but he was really not going very far with his own company. It didn't pan out the way he wanted it to. The company with his friend, that was going really well, and they were making a lot of money, but I think there was an understanding that he needed to have a not 9 to 5, but a steady paycheck before he asked his girlfriend to marry him and start a family. So he is an entrepreneur in spirit. And I think he's always, even though he's working, he has a really good job now. I think he's always trying to think of, is there another way? How can I also make money? But I think that's kind of lessening, but he's got that spirit in him. My daughter is the youngest, period, the youngest girl, and the youngest is a realtor. And so you have to have that entrepreneurial spirit to be a realtor, because it's on you. Your pay is on you. And so I think she has that, but I don't know that she would see herself as an entrepreneur, even though I think she is. And I think a lot of people would think she is, because it's on her to go get her leads and do the showings and send the contract and all of the stuff. It's on her. So now the oldest one, it's funny because, and again, we're a blended family. So he came into my life as a very young teenager. In a way, we used to go to church together. That's a whole other thing. But came back into my life, he was a younger teenager, but he always had this, what do I want to invent? I want to think of something to invent to get rich, but I want to invent something. What can I invent? And he's always looking around and thinking, and even though he's married now and about to be 30, he still, I think, has that in his mind somewhere. Someday I'm going to invent something, and then I'm going to be able to quit my job and just, live on the money. So he has that in him, definitely has that in him. The others, kind of like some of the girls, daughter-in-laws and my other daughter, we have two girls, they have that in them a little bit too. Like, can I work at home and take care of, like you, Michelle, can I work at home and raise my kids? So I think some of them are thinking in that line, but just haven't pulled that trigger. So I would say definitely we have that.
That's awesome. So when you're building your business, it sounds like everyone was probably very supportive of you because there's already that mindset within the family.
Well, well, my biological daughter, the youngest girl, the one who's the realtor, she was all in, and she helped me for a while, and then it came to the point she was like, okay, I really need to go have my own life now, and I love realty, and that's what I want to do. And she if you so my the first podcast, the Communicate Great podcast, is very rough. It was especially very rough at the beginning, but she was helping me with marketing. That's one of the things I did for the nonprofits, for a couple of the nonprofits, the marketing side of things. And it's not my background, but when you were in a small nonprofit, some of them micro, you wear a lot of hats. And I did marketing for a couple of the nonprofits. And so I learned as I was doing it. And so I said to her, I need help with marketing. I can do it. That's not how I want to spend my time. I want to spend my time serving my people. And so I worked with her, and she obviously is very quick study. So she was supportive and is still supportive. She periodically, if I kind of get behind, I'll say, hey, I need help. And she'll put a few hours in and I'll pay her. And so she's still there, but she, I'd say, was the most supportive of them. Maybe one or two will ask periodically how it's going, but they don't really care. Honestly, they don't really care. They just do their own thing. They don't really ask. So, and they all know I have a podcast, and they used to listen just to support. And mostly it was because my daughter was like, here's the new link, go listen. And we started out with a Spotify, and so there was no video. And then we were having for Texas, we were having some bad winter weather, and we weren't going to be able to be together to record. And we were having a meeting with somebody, and she said, oh, I use Riverside and I just do the visual. Well, I had been wanting to go with video for a while with the podcast, and my daughter was like, no, I don't want to. No, I don't want to. But because we had been doing recording on Monday and dropping on Monday, we did it that day. We kind of figured it out, and she was at her home and I was at mine. And that's how we started doing it. But at first they were listening because Emma would put the link into, we have a family group chat or text series. So she would put that in and say, go listen, and some of them wouldn't. So I would say I haven't had a whole lot of support, honestly. I really haven't. And that's been hard. And that's a conversation I've had with other people as I've been interviewed, is it can get hard when you don't have support from your spouse, from your children, from your friends. It's hard and it can be lonely. And so, Michelle, I know that you serve moms who are entrepreneurs, and I'm guessing that is not an unusual story that they feel alone in their home.
I was going to say that is actually a very common story. I feel most moms that I speak with have the same type of thing, which is they feel alone in their journey and trying to build their business.
Yeah.
People aren't really supportive, or they are supportive, but only to a certain extent.
Right.
And I've noticed a lot of moms, they feel like maybe someone's supportive on the outside, but they don't feel like that person believes in them, which is also difficult.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah, it's funny because that is not uncommon at all. But I'd love to get into, so you started the Communicate Great, you had your podcast, and you had her helping you a little bit with the marketing to help you kind of get off the ground, which is awesome. So you did mention your business has two sides to it. So let's talk a little bit about what you do now. So you have the Communicate business, Communicate Great, and there's two different sides. So what are both of those sides?
So the side that I put out the most is helping people with public speaking, but it's not just anybody. And I mentioned earlier that I am a really big introvert. And even though right now we're recording and we're one-on-one, when I'm done with this, I'm going to want to fall over on my settee right here and just curl up for a minute and regain my energy. And on top of that, I also have a definite shyness and timidity about me. And that's something I very much struggle with. So because that's how I feel, that's the type of person that I want to help with public speaking. I want to help the new person who knows that they have a message that the world needs to hear, because that can help people. I want to help the people who are fearful of it, but they know that they need to be doing it. I want to help the person who has been doing it for a little bit, but they know that they need to be better. Maybe they're kind of just winging it and learning on their own, but they want somebody to walk alongside them and help them. That's the kind of person that I want to help. Have I helped others in public speaking that have come to me that maybe are very much already speaking? Yeah, I've done that. I had one person who was on the radio, and he's been speaking for years, and he said, "Hey, here's a workshop. I want to start doing it. I recorded it with this group I was working with live. Will you go through it and just let me know what you think?" And so I worked with him. I reviewed his workshop, and we went over it so that he made it stronger for the next time. So there are one-offs, people like that I work with, but mostly it is just the person wanting to get started or has already gotten started or has been doing it but is still very fearful. And one of the things, and Michelle, you and I talked about in your group, I've been hearing people have this camera shyness, this video camera shyness. And I'll give you that story in a minute, but I have a challenge that's been evergreen, but I'm going to do it live a couple of times in 2026, because it's not just speaking on stage. That public speaking is so far beyond that, especially when the pandemic hit and I know a lot of people don't like using that word because sometimes it gets flagged. So when that event is what they'll say, when that event hit back in 2020, everybody went video. Everybody went video because you had to, because everybody was stuck at home. And I think that allowed more and more people to realize I can help people by being on video. I don't have to be in person on a stage in front of 10 people, 20 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people. I can reach many people through this, just the video. So when I say public speaking, it's not just standing on stage and giving a keynote. It's not about giving an after dinner speech. It's so much more. It's if you have content that you're creating, if you are a nonprofit and you have to stand in front of your board, if you have to stand in front of your volunteers, your donors, if you are a for-profit company and you are the face of the company and you need to put yourself out. So it's so many things. And that is who my heart is for helping. And that is the primary focus of my business. So the other thing that I do is I help people with interpersonal communication skills. And on a very, very limited capacity, I will have people reach out to me and say, "Hey, can you come in and work with my team?" And so if I've got time, if I feel the fit is right, then I will do that as I can. That's not really something I publicize, although I may be starting to in 26 a little more, is letting people know I also serve others this way. And that could be everything from an occasional workshop or a team building activity. I want to start doing retreats for teams, for groups. Could be a board, it could be, the marketing, to whoever it is. I want to start doing that. But I do everything from one-offs to long-term workshops or sessions, because it's the long term where you can make the biggest difference in the team. And so everything I do has a focus of interpersonal communication skills. So the soft skills, learning about conflict, learning about listening. I'm having a hard time naming things. Conflict, learning about listening and verbal and nonverbal, and just how to use tools and techniques to be able to communicate well with people. And so how did I come to that? Because people will say, and I'm a rule follower, but I'm also a rebel in a way. People were saying to me at the very beginning, no, you can only do one thing. You have to pick your niche or your niche, however you say it. You have to pick a lane, and you have to serve one type of right fit client. And that didn't feel right to me because I didn't know which direction. And I taught I taught both at college for 10 years. I taught interpersonal comm and I taught public speaking, and I loved both, but for two different reasons. I loved public speaking, again, because I'm an introvert, and I knew that there were students who were introverts taking it. They were both required courses, so they had to be there. I had the students anyhow, but so I loved that because I loved watching the students grow from day one to the final day. You could just see the progress in how their speeches were developing. And that was so, so much fun. But then the other side, the interpersonal comm side, that was where you saw relationships change. Because typically when it came to the listening portion of my course, I would have often men say, I don't want to listen to my wife. I don't want to listen to my girlfriend. I just want to blah, blah, blah. And then by the end of that course, the whole class, they had softened, they had turned. I had people crying in my class. My rule was, just like the commercial, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. My rule in that class was, we are going to be opening up ourselves. We are going to be vulnerable. We are going to be talking about a lot of stuff in here. What is said in this class stays in this class. And I taught, for the most part, I taught military. I was teaching on a military base, and there was a blend of active duty and retired. And so it was a close-knit family, and people knew each other. And these mostly men got to the point where they felt like they could cry. So I had more men in those 10 years cry than I did women. I had a few women do that, but golly, you're unpacking a lot of stuff when you start talking about intrapersonal, which is communicating with yourself, and interpersonal, which is communicating with, 2, 3, 4, just a small number of people, but mostly it's very, very, very relational. So I loved both, and I could not pick which one I wanted to do. And so I thought, you know what, let's look at Apple. Apple does computers, they do watches, they do iPads, they do phones, they do tags, they do all of this stuff. And they didn't just say, I'm going to only do computers, I'm going to only do laptops, they didn't. They do technology. And so I thought, I can too. It's my company. I can do what I want. And I teach people communication. And yeah, public speaking is communication. Interpersonal and intrapersonal, that's communication. And so I thought, I'm going to do both because I love doing both, and it makes a difference in somebody's life. So that is how I came to doing both of those things within Communicate Great. I went against the grain. I went against what advice I had. I'm still getting people say, why are you doing that? Just pick one. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do what I love, which is helping people. And it happens to be in two different veins. So that is what I do with the two sides of Communicate Great.
I love that. Yeah, it's like, I think when people tell you pick one avenue and just stick with it, usually it's because, well, they want you to be consistent with one avenue, and you have to be consistent and show up enough to be able to get clients doing it. But I also understand what you're saying, and I agree, where if you look at something like Apple, it's like, what is the company of Apple? What are they selling, right? They're selling really the Apple operating system, which
Right.
can be packaged in so many different ways, whether it's a phone, whether it's an iPad, an iPhone,
Yeah.
an iPod, or a computer, whatever.
Watch.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's absolutely true. And I think there's also the other adjective, which is, or the other statement, which is make more offers, make more money, right? Which is, if you can take what you're doing and package it for multiple different people, well, now you can pretty much serve anybody that comes your way, right? So I love what you did there, where you're taking, look, I know communication, And I can teach you how to communicate with your team. I can teach you how to communicate with yourself. I can teach you how to communicate with your partners. I can teach you how to communicate with a camera for marketing purposes. Like, you can really teach them how to communicate in any capacity, but it's what's actually going to make sense for that person and what they need. And I
Exactly.
thought it was interesting where you talked about being on a military base, because
Mhm.
that was like so far from what I was expecting you to say. So how did something like that come about? Like, how did you end up on a military base, and what were you even doing there?
Okay, so I am not, I have not ever been in the military, and please understand I have the most respect for our military, active duty and retired. I do. So I was a single mom for a while. I mentioned that I was blended. We're a blended family. And I knew that when my kids were not in school, I wanted to be home with them. And so I also knew that if I got a call and one of them was sick, I wanted to be home with them. So I did quite a few part-time things cold together to make money while I was single. And I had a friend, she has now passed, also from cancer. She was military, and she was teaching. It's called Northwood University, and they actually have campuses, I believe, across the United States. I think maybe even internationally, maybe. But they had a campus on the military base here in Fort Worth. And there were actually a couple of colleges that were housed there. And so my friend, Cindy, she was teaching. She was not in the military anymore. She was teaching at Northwood, and their communication person left. She had been there for years, left, and so they needed somebody. And she contacted me and said, "Hey, would you want to teach college? This specific program is night only." And I thought, "Okay, it's at the night. It's, during the night, and I wanted to be home with my kids. They were still pretty small." And I just felt like the answer needed to be yes. And here is a kind of a side thing of one of the reasons I said yes. When my mom was alive, she called me one day and she said, "I had a dream. You were teaching at a college," and she named the college, and it was not the same one I ended up teaching at. And I was like, "Well, why would I teach there? I don't necessarily agree with some of their politics." And so I was like, "Okay, I might teach, but it's not going to be at that college that she mentioned." So when Cindy called me, Mom had already planted that seed of, "I had a dream that you were teaching college." And I thought, okay, maybe this is what God has for me. And so I went in and I interviewed, and they offered me the job. I, I guess I came across competent in what I do, but I have a master's in communication as well. And so I qualified to teach communication. That's what my bachelor's and my master's was in. And that is how I ended up on a military base because of my friend Cindy. Their communication person quit. She knew what I did or my background. And at the time I was still doing a lot with nonprofits. But that is how, and I'm telling you, I also taught for a very brief period of time at a community college. Well, it was a community college network, and I taught at two different campuses. Again, very short time. And I loved, loved, loved my time at Northwood University serving the military members because, for the most part, not always, they were very respectful, and they were hard workers, and they wanted to be at school. They wanted to get that degree. They wanted to learn more and position themselves for when they got out of the military. And again, some of them were retired, but I'm retired now. What do I do? I still have a lot of life left in me, and I want to do this. And it was a private business university. And so they were all there to start a business, be in business, something with business. And they were very careful usually in turning in assignments and communicating with me. So my time there Wow, that was just one of the best times of my life, those 10 years working with those students. I loved them.
That's awesome. That's so funny. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's that's pretty cool. So if we're looking at communication,
Mm,
right, and the things that you're teaching,
mm,
let's go a little bit into that because I know a lot of
okay.
the mom entrepreneurs that'll be watching this. One of their biggest things, like we talked about, is how do I show up on camera? How do I make
Mm,
content? There's a fear around it. How do
yes.
I, if they want to speak or do a workshop, something like that.
Yeah.
These are things that really do come up quite often.
Hmm.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you would like, what's your typical advice? How would you advise someone get started?
Hmm.
Those types of things.
So I think I mentioned, and I don't remember if it was while we were chatting or if it's since we've been recording, but I mentioned that I have a challenge, a 7-day challenge, Bye Bye Video Camera Shy, 7-day challenge. And how that came to be was this was years ago, but after I started Communicate Great, my husband came to me and he said, they're asking me to do a video at work. I don't want to do a video at work. And so we talked through that a little bit. And then they recorded the video. And he called me and he said, Why was it so hard for me to do this thing with one other person in the room holding the camera? And I was nervous and I was stumbling and stuttering. And why is that? Nobody was there. It's not like I was on a stage. And so from there, I thought, you know what? This is real. A lot of people have this video camera shyness, me as well. And my daughter, that's why she didn't want to do video podcasts. She didn't want to be on camera. So it is a very, very real thing. And out of that, I thought, I know that this hits a lot of people. So that's when I created that challenge. Now, recently, I created another resource, which is a workshop, and I've done it once, and I'm going to be doing it several times throughout 2026. And that is called Camera Comfort. Well, video camera comfort starts here. And so that's where we kind of look at why. What is going on inside your mind that is giving you this cause to not want to hit record, or hit record, delete, hit record, delete, hit record, delete, hit record, delete. And you could do that 100 times because why? We want to be perfect. That is one of the biggest reasons. So Michelle, I'm going to kind of bounce it back to you. When you were talking with the women in your community and they are echoing this sentiment of, I don't want to be on video, are they giving you any reasons? Are they saying this is why?
Most of it seems to be that they're concerned about how they're going to be perceived.
Yep.
So it almost hits like it almost feels like, one, it's the time constraint of like, oh, I have to do my makeup, I have to like do all these things before I can
Right.
be on camera. That's just
Right.
annoying, right?
Right.
And then the other side of it is hitting publish. It's I'm going to hit publish and people are going to see this and what are they going to think about it? What
Right.
if they, what if like that, a little bit of that imposter syndrome? What if this,
Right.
they're calling me out on, I heard that one. Someone was like, what if I say the wrong thing? I'm like, you're a professional. You're not going to say the wrong thing. Right. And like if someone else says the wrong thing on your channel, whatever, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not a big deal.
Right.
So I feel like those are the things that I hear the most often.
Okay, well, let's address those. First of all, let's look at me. I help people with public speaking. What have I been doing through this entire recording? I have been stumbling and stuttering over my words. I am tired. I am super tired. And when I'm super tired, I sometimes have a hard time communicating well. So this is me. I am a public speaking professional, have been for years, and I'm stumbling and stuttering and missing my words and saying and having those filler words. So the first thing I'm going to say is, and so what? Right? We're all human. I am human. And my guess is, hopefully, as people are watching this, until I just mentioned it, which is one of my things, don't ever call out your mistakes when you're giving any kind of public talk, video or otherwise. Don't call out your mistakes. I will call you on that real fast. Don't say I'm sorry. Don't call it out. Why? Because now people are focusing on that mistake, and they're not listening to what you're saying. And maybe you've got some really great stuff to say and they're missing it because they're focusing on the fact that you just apologized for something and now they're thinking about what you did wrong. But my guess is until I said that, people probably didn't really think in their head, oh, she's stumbling, she's starting over, she's changing direction mid-sentence. They probably weren't thinking that, and she's a public speaking person, right? My guess is that's not happening. So number one, we are human, and generally our audience, they're there for a reason unless they have to be there. Somebody's like, okay, you're on my team and you're going to go sit, and then they're like, I don't want to listen. But generally your audience is on your side, and that's what people forget. They want to see you succeed. They are cheering you on for the most part. So there is that. Remember, people want you to do well, unless you've got a nemesis in your audience who wants you to fail. But really, what is the likelihood of that? Probably pretty small. Number two, we want to be perfect. We want to be perceived as perfect, as polished, as I'm the expert. And if I'm not perceived as that, people aren't going to want to believe that I can serve them, that I can do the best that I can do, that I know what I'm doing. So you have to get to that place where I have finally gotten to, even in my shyness, I've gotten to the point where normally we would have ended this recording and I would have flogged myself for at least the greater part of the day because I, in my opinion, did not do a good job because I stumbled over some of my words. I'm not like that anymore. And I would say just coming to the place where you say, I'm human, it's okay. You have to get to that point to understand life and death does not hang on this. I think it was Jerry Seinfeld was one of the big people that always said people would rather die than stand on stage. That was the statistic. They were more afraid of public speaking than they were of death. So when you think about it, really, are you going to die? Most likely not. Are you going to cause somebody in your audience to die? Most likely not. It is not a matter of life and death. It's okay if you mess up. So that is another thing. What harm am I going to cause? Now let's take, Michelle, your idea that imposter syndrome. What if I say the wrong thing? Well, here is the deal. Every expert, for the most part, has an opinion. They're a thought leader, and they're called thought leaders for a reason. They have their own way of thinking about what they do. Now, you have some things that across the board. For instance, I think most people who teach public speaking or who help people with content, that kind of thing, well, in public speaking, when I taught it, we called it the attention getter. That's what I taught my students. It's the attention getter. Now it's called the hook. Most people aren't going to tell you, this is one of my big things, don't start with your name. Don't start with, I'm Michelle, I'm Tracy. That's not how to start your video. That's not how to start your talk. That's not how to start your workshop. Don't do it. Okay. So I think that's one of those examples of something that's across the board. So in your members' niches, they probably have some of those standard things that most people agree with. But you know what? If you're an expert and that's not your opinion, and you're still an expert, you're not a phony, a fraud, an imposter if you say something because that is your thought. That is what you believe within your realm of your niche or niche. So if you say it, that's okay. And here is the thing, I might say something, and because now video lives forever, and I think that's also what people are afraid of, I can change my mind. I can learn more. I can have a new thought. Things can change. Okay. Change it. It's okay. And if somebody calls you out, well, you said this here 3 years ago, and now you're saying this here. Yeah, because you know what? As humans, we are ever evolving, ever changing the way we think, the way we believe. That's okay. People can change. It really can happen. So I would say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Now, if you say something and you haven't hit publish yet, and it really is a mistake, redo that part and edit. Or if you don't, do the whole thing again. But I would say, number one, realize we are all human. We are all human and we all make mistakes, and it's okay. I'm going to give you a real quick story. When I was teaching college, one of my students was giving a talk, and I always assign different types of talks. So she was giving her talk, and she started crying because it was a persuasive talk, and it was about pool safety and putting a fence around your pool. She lost a grandchild to a pool. The grandchild got into the pool. No one knew. He passed, and he was young. She's crying and apologizing. And I said, there is not one person in this classroom that doesn't understand your tears. You owe no apologies. You do not have to apologize for being human. And so let's take that idea and put it to the members of your group, or really whoever is watching this. You are human, and you feel and you think and you act because you are human. And don't be afraid to be human. Who wants the perfectly polished performance? That's when I work with people, we don't focus on performing. You hear so many talks and it's like a performance. Come on. Like, Michelle, I'm just going to ask you, does that feel good to watch somebody performing for you? Right?
No, of course not. And I was going to say too, it makes me think of right now, we're at this antitrust market anyway. And these very raw, unedited, very, mistake prone types of things are what's actually performing the best right now, because people
Mhm.
want that authentic connection. And it
Yeah,
also makes me think of, like you were talking about, the lady with the pool. And, we make purchasing decisions and we take action based on emotion.
exactly.
And so the more emotion we can have, we might view that as like, oh my gosh, I'm being vulnerable. This is awkward. Like I'm, being that way with this audience. But in reality, you're portraying the emotion and you're giving them emotion to lean on, which is going to help them take the actions that you want them to take anyway.
Right, right.
Mhm.
And I will say this, we have a pool. There's not room for a fence in our backyard, but believe me, I've thought about her talk over and over and over and over again when the kids were younger swimming, and now that we're getting grandkids. That talk has stuck with me, not just because I was the teacher, but because I heard the talk and I saw her pain. And that had happened years before, and she was still carrying that pain. Who wouldn't? So I like that. And yes, when I work with people, authenticity is one of my big things. Is I really want to work with them to get them to the point where it's not a rote, memorized, I'm just vomiting it out kind of a thing. I don't tell any of my people to memorize their speech. I don't ever. No, don't do it. So
I love that. So if someone wanted to get started with being more on camera or being
yeah.
more in the public eye, what are like 3 to 5 different action steps that you would give them to get started on?
Okay, my first thing is, don't wing it. There are impromptu talks, right? And I have Wednesday workshops within my community. And so, and every week it's a different thing. So, but they're rotating. For instance, the first Wednesday of every month, it's me teaching and them implementing. But one of the other Wednesdays is impromptus. And even when you're giving an impromptu, which is where, an example, you're in a team meeting and your boss walks up and he goes, oh, hey, I want you to talk about this during the meeting. And you're going, but the meeting is starting in 1 minute. What am I going to do? So that is a very real thing, but you're still not winging it. That's not what I teach. So number one, don't wing it, have a plan. Number two, even if you've got that impromptu, somebody's saying at the last second, oh, hey, can you do this? Oh, somebody can't give the toast. They aren't here. I need you to give the toast. Whatever that looks like. There's a framework where you can work through it and practice. So number one, don't wing it, have a plan. Number two, rehearse it. Even if you're sitting in the meeting and everybody's chatting because they're having their pastry and their coffee right now, you're going over it in your head. You're going over it in your head. So don't wing it, have a plan and practice, rehearse it for as much as you can. So that's one and two. Number three, is so many times you hear just do it. You have to do it. So as I was working on the Bye Bye Video Camera Shy challenge, one of the things I learned from some of the experts was that you have to do at least one, and I don't know what the statistic is today. I'm just telling you back then this was the statistic. And I could imagine because it's human nature that probably hasn't changed a lot. But the average was 100 videos. You had to do 100 videos before you started feeling like you were really understanding and doing well. But then also the thing is iterations. Every time you stand on a stage, whether it's in person or recording on a video, learn from it. Go back and watch it. One of the things I've asked people is, who likes hearing their own voice? Do you like hearing your own voice? Maybe you've been doing it a while, Michelle, but most of us, until we get used to it, don't like hearing our own voice. We don't like watching ourselves on video, but you need to do that. You need to go back and watch the video. And if it's in person, have somebody record it. If your venue is not recording it for you and giving you access to that, which if they're not, you need to ask that to happen. But if the answer is no, bring a friend, set up your camera, your whatever, and record it, because it's very, very important for you to make iterations and change little bits at a time so that you can continuously grow in the craft. And so what I would say is do it and keep doing it. And that's one of the points of the challenge is if you do all of the challenge steps, by the time you're done, you've done between 50 and 60 videos just within that challenge. And that already has you a pretty good way into that 100 where you're starting to really feel, I'm not gonna say good about it, but accepting that you can do this. So that's another thing, is just do it, but watch yourself, listen to yourself, get past that cringe phase and think, what can I do better? So those are three things just kind of right off the top of my head that I can think that people can do right now.
Awesome. And then I know you mentioned you have a school community.
Mhm.
So how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to touch base with you?
Sure, it's in the school community. It's Public Speakers Growth Hub. I can't remember if I have the in there. It's either the Public Speakers Growth Hub or Public Speakers Growth Hub. And I know, Michelle, I think I gave you the link. I think you're going to put it with this show
Yeah,
description.
and we'll put the link in the description as well.
Right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, but it's on the school platform, and I do have different tiers. I know those of us who are in the school world understand that there are different models. There's free and freemium and tiers and one time and all the things. So I have mine set at tiers. And so there's the standard, the premium, and the VIP. And so that is one place that they can get to me. Also, I want to say that I'm planning on, if everything falls into place, launching an area above the VIP, and that's going to be a very small mastery type community where, okay, I'm fully committed to this public speaking journey, again, whether virtual or on stage, and it's just a small group. And now we work on the back end of things, your sizzle reels, your one pagers, your website, and work on finding stages. So there's ultimately going to be 4 levels to my community, but right now there are 3. And so, yeah, just on school.
Awesome. And then, like I said, we'll definitely make sure that we have that in the description for you. So before we finish, is there any last piece of advice, encouragement, or anything like that that you wanted to share with the viewers?
I absolutely do. And let me go back to when I was teaching college, and the first night of class, and this is an exercise I have people do. I put up two signs on opposite sides of the room. And one said, "No problem, I can do these in my sleep." And one said, "Quick, hide me now." And I had my students stand up on this continuum, this invisible continuum, where they felt on night one about public speaking. And so they stood, and I said, "Remember where you are." So then the last night of class, I put the two signs up again, and I said, "Go to where you were on night one." And they went. And then I said, "Go to where you are now, walking out tonight as your last class." And so it was lovely because everybody shifted more toward the "no problem, I can do these, I can do these in my sleep" kind of a thing. And although I have to say one time, and I don't know if the person was being contrary, one time did I have a shift go the other way. But it also could be that maybe they were doing them and figured out, "Oh, crud, I don't know what I'm doing." I've had those moments when I've studied things like, "Oh, I think I've got listening." I did a whole 16-week course on listening in my master's, and I thought, "No problem, I can do this. I'm a great listener." I left the first night in tears. So maybe it was more of that, like, "Oh, I thought I knew what I was doing, but really I have a lot to learn." I never asked the person why you moved the other direction. I thought about it, but I didn't. So, but it was fun. So here is my point. To answer your question, I've gone in a long circle. But those students who did not want to be there, I would tell them, "Yes, you can do this." And that's actually why my "Oh, Yes, I Can Women in Business" name got its name, was going back to when I taught public speaking. Yes, you can do this, and I'm going to do this with you. I've got you. Because I was them. I didn't. The irony is that all the way to the class, whether it was interpersonal or public speaking, I was praying. I was like, "Lord, I can't do this. You've got to do this for me," because I didn't want to be up in front of them. But once I got there and I was teaching and I was seeing that it made a difference, it flipped. Like I was in it. So please know, my advice to you, my pep talk to you is, yes, you can do this. You can serve people well. You have a passion. You know that you can make a difference in someone's life. So yes, you can. Yes, you can do this. That is my advice.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I normally have people on my podcasts, but it's kind of fun to go on somebody else's. So I appreciate that you allowed me this space and allowed me just to have this conversation with you.